Catholics, like all other Americans, want the same thing on the natural level. We want a secure border. We want to be able to go home and feed our families. For my generation, especially, it was the housing crisis that was an issue. We were looking around and saying, we can't realistically expect to buy our own house. Well, there's broader reasons why he's nominating these people more than just on the Israel issue. Ultimately, as Catholics, we need to be pushing for the social reign of Christ. The U.S. bishops, if they are unfortunately peddling an illegal immigration, mostly more likely than not for the money that is involved in it. This might be kind of a spicy opinion even for your audience, but I personally think that the federal government needs to prosecute, needs to actually go forward.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Nicholas Cavazos did some great some content just prior to the election that went really viral. It was awesome. It was his predictions, and he wasn't that far off, actually. We've invited him to get his take post-election. Nicholas, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. Praise be to God. So let me ask you, just what were your general impressions the night of and the day after?
Yeah, so the night of, I think I was feeling like a lot of your listeners out there, a little bit of the jitters of trying to figure out if we were going to win or not. I was feeling fairly confident, though, because there are some both leading and, I guess, if you will, exiting indicators on predicting elections that people can look into. So I was feeling fairly good, and I talk about this in my video on the subject. But going into election night, we did a stream of myself and our friends, our mutual friends, Anthony and Rob, over on Avoiding Babylon. We did a 6-hour stream covering the news and just seeing state by state fall, and my prediction come into place was very satisfying. And then, of course, the post-election meltdown that you see mostly on, I would say, Gen Z social media platforms, places like TikTok, the salt was surely flowing, and so it was very amusing to see, to say the least.
Yeah, it's definitely not boring. It's definitely entertaining. Were there any surprises from your perspective as far as the election was concerned? Any surprises whatsoever?
In the data, not really. When you look at the best indicators on predicting elections, really are twofold. One is going to be looking at the party identification. Gallup poll every single election cycle does an aggregated polling sampling of Americans, and they just basically say, regardless of where your party registration is, what do you identify as politically? And for the first time in a long time, the Republican Party was up by around 2 to 3 points on aggregate, which was a good sign that they were going to carry the popular vote. And because historically Republicans have always been kind of the minority party in the sense of the popular vote, that was a good sign that Trump would win all 7 swing states and carry the election. So seeing that, as well as really good gray A pollsters that have gotten previous elections right, dead on the money, places like Atlas Intel, seeing them say that Trump would win the popular vote by 2 points and that he would carry all the swing states. When you put all of those things together, plus party registration being up for the GOP in every state but Colorado, this gave me a lot of data points to say, yeah, Trump is going to win this thing and it's going to not be close.
What about the Hispanic vote going for Trump in a big way?
Yeah, that was very impressive to see, but it makes sense because unfortunately the liberals have this really 1990s understanding of the culture where it's like, there are white people who vote conservative, and then everyone else, just because you're not white, is supposed to vote for them. It's called BIPOC, really. And it's really, really cringe and sad because it's, okay, people can think for themselves regardless of their melanin content. Like it's just a foolish assertion. And so seeing him win the Hispanic vote, I think, was somewhat of a surprise, at least when it comes to men, but also not really, because the liberals, particularly on college campuses, have demonized masculinity to such a degree that men eventually I knew were just going to snap. We've talked about a great pendulum swing, and I think you're starting to see the beginning of the pendulum swing back to the right.
I think a lot of people were also on the lookout for the shenanigans that we saw in 2020. And, surprisingly, we didn't see as much this time, although they're still counting votes in California right now. Let that sink in.
They are. And you do, in fact, have some interesting shenanigans when it comes to 3 a.m. mail drop boxes. But it wasn't so much in the presidency. It was more so in Senate races. If individuals go and look at the for instance, the Wisconsin Senate races, you'll find that classic inverted Democrat vote totals that you saw in 2020 rise around 3 a.m. from all of the mail-in votes being dumped into the system and things along that nature, which is very concerning. And so I think the reason for that is because Kamala was uniquely a bad candidate. Biden definitely threw the Democrat Party under the bus intentionally for throwing him under the bus by endorsing her very quickly after his coup if you will. And so he was wanting revenge. He threw her in there because he doesn't like her. His wife doesn't like her, and so he knew that she would win. And so I think a lot of the Dems knew this lady doesn't have a chance, but let's save as much as we can of the down ballot races. And I think that's what they tried to do.
I was also very surprised, I guess pleasantly so, that the majority of Catholics, not a majority, I suppose, but it was like close to 50% of Catholics voted for Donald Trump. That seemed like a block that we haven't seen in quite a number of years. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, if memory serves, it was 56% of Catholics voted for Trump. And I think you can see a number of factors. One, and I'd say this is the majority factor, is that Catholics, like all other Americans, want the same thing on the natural level. We want a secure border. We want to be able to go home and feed our families. For my generation, especially, it was the housing crisis that was an issue. We were looking around and saying, we can't realistically expect to buy our own house. Just because, as an example, you look in 2020, you needed to be making roughly around $73K a year in order to purchase a home and maintain that home, pay off that home, etc. But now it's risen up to around $130,000 to $150,000 a year. And when you look in the reality that most Gen Zers make around $39,000 a year, but have around $60,000 worth of student loan debt, this was a mountain that was impassable. It was too much. And so seeing these things, I think, motivated Gen Zers as well as a lot of Catholics to leave. Of course, Kamala didn't help herself by her mocking video that she put out at the Al Smith dinner, refusing to go to that in general, but then also just her history with combating the Knights of Columbus and then all kinds of anti-Catholic sentiments. And so it comes back in the age of the internet to bite you.
Yeah, it surely does, doesn't it? Christ is king. Maybe she didn't get that memo, but unfortunately for her. But okay, so the next 4 years, I really want to think about the next 4 years as a Catholic, because all right, we voted 56% to get Donald Trump in office, and he seems to be the better of the two options, the lesser of two evils. That's what we told ourselves when we voted. But he still is, giving way to abortion. He's giving way to in vitro fertilization. He's giving way to contraception. He has, as far as I know, no plans to defend marriage between a man and a woman. So he's supporting the Rainbow Coalition in that. So there's a lot of issues that we as Catholics should be standing up for and trying to pressure him to change on. Do you think that will happen in the next 4 years?
So Catholics don't have the strength in the United States to really stop any of that. And the reason that they don't is because when you actually look at the statistics of American Catholics, you'll find that according to Pew Research and other firms, 95% of American quote unquote Catholics believe contraception is okay. 86% that believe that gay marriage is okay, and 54% believe that abortion is okay. So our own house is a mess, and there's no way that 5% of Catholics that actually hold all of Catholic social morality are going to be able to turn the GOP away from a more liberalization, if you will. Historically, I think the GOP has been pro-life mostly because of the evangelical coalitions, not really, and to a degree because of Catholics. But we've lost that. And I think the reason that we've lost that, and it's a conversation that I wish that the broader community would have, is why did we lose the pro-life argument? Like, we won when it came to having Roe versus Wade overturned, but then why did we lose it after that? Why are red states actually opting for abortion? And the reason is because when you actually look at the data, you find that most Americans are not where we are, against abortion in all cases. And they're also not Ralph Northam mode, right? Governor of Virginia, who says, you can still have the abortion after the birth. They're in the middle. They're more like, first or second trimester abortion, which is unfortunate. That's where most Americans are. And so I think that there is a lot of hope that we can have on particularly foreign policy, domestic policy, these types of issues when it comes to the Trump presidency. And of course, I think we need to be praying and dialoguing with President Trump. But I think that we need to actually do an examination of conscience and figure out where we lost the debate, because people aren't listening to us anymore, and we need to figure out new methods in order to engage those voters.
I think it seems to me that the pro-life orgs in our country aren't on the same page, and they don't really work together all that well. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's very fair. I think whenever you talk to people, as I have in the pro-life movement, they say, we have a lot of good that we're obviously trying to bring forward, but our leadership is divided. There's oftentimes petty squabblings and feuds between these leaders and things along that nature. And so when you see that, and then you see that in particular, when it comes to kind of these personalities that rise up, I think it does more detriment to the movement as a whole. And unfortunately, unless that movement really does get a grip and say, okay, how can we in our state really reach the hearts and minds of these voters and change their opinion, unless they really start to do that, then nothing's going to change. I mean, they can complain all they want to about the GOP doing this or President Trump doing that. But again, it's like if we've isolated ourselves into a place of nigh irrelevancy, and I say that not as an insult, but just to say, like, look, we're losing red states. We shouldn't be losing these red states. Because we're losing them, we need to do an examination of conscience, and we need to figure out what the heck's going on.
We're going to be at a break here in just a moment, but I also kind of want to talk about Trump's cabinet picks, because one of the things that concerns me is he's going for that more evangelical standard flair, especially when it comes to geopolitics. So it's all pro-Israel all the time. And, listen, I don't want Israelis dying needlessly in the Holy Land as much as anybody. But at the same time, I don't believe leveling cities is the proper response to that. I mean, it's the Christians in the middle that are getting caught between a rock and a hard place, quite literally. And yet the cabinet picks seem to be very one-sided in that. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the way that you want to look at them. I think that a lot of the discussion in conservative circles about these individuals is either you're going to look at them as I do, which is says, well, there's broader reasons why he's nominating these people more than just on the Israel issue. However, I think that unfortunately the conversation in kind of particularly young right-wing circles has only been through the lens of, is this person a Zionist or is this person a supporter of Israel? And therefore, I think that actually kind of clouds their judgment, and they're not able to see the grander picture. So like we'll talk about it in a little bit, but why did he pick Marco Rubio? There's more reasons than just he's pro-Israel or something like that he's picking Marco Rubio. And if people actually, open their eyes and look at kind of the grand chessboard that is politics, they'll kind of be able to see why he's picking these individuals for his platform overall.
But I want to talk about Trump trolling in some of these cabinet picks. It does seem like Trump is, trying to troll the enemies a wee bit. RFK being an example of that. And I saw sort of last week I had Bishop Strickland on because he gave a great speech in front of the USCCB. And some people were saying maybe we should have Bishop Strickland be the ambassador to the Vatican. Could you imagine? Could you imagine such a thing? What do you say? Do you think Trump is trying to troll the enemies, the deep state, with some of these picks?
Yeah, I think he's doing a myriad of things. I think ultimately his goal is to actually change the system fundamentally. Trump, for whether you like him or loathe him, I mean, the one thing he does have that we can all agree on is an ego, and he wants to see his legacy as a legacy of change, which is what is going to happen. And so when you look at these picks, you see how drastically different they are from the 2016 picks. And the reason so is because Trump now has 4 years under his belt of political experience, plus another 4 years of insane political persecution as an outsider. And so he is picking these individuals to, one, kind of, yes, troll the deep state, if you will, but then two, I believe, ultimately to change the system fundamentally and to see it change. And so whether that's going to be RFK and health, actually bringing in some good conversations about healthcare, or whether that's going to be, for instance, Tom Holman on the border, actually doing what the federal government has written into law, actually enforcing the laws that are already on the books, and doing mass deportations. All of it's going to be good ultimately, and it's going to help the American people greatly.
It's RFK, healthcare, yet at the same time he's pro-abortion. So what kind of healthcare are we actually going to end up there? It seems very lopsided in their outlook as far as that goes. And I guess that's my issue as a Catholic. I see the world through a Catholic lens. It's the only valid lens that exists in my humble opinion. So any sort of compromise on the abortion issues, marriage issues, I feel shouldn't be tolerated. And yet we're doing that. But to your point before the break, and I want you to follow up on that, is you're saying we have to take a look at the bigger picture of geopolitics instead of focusing that sort of minutely on some key issues.
Yeah, it's not to downplay those key issues. One should, of course, keep Catholic principles and push those Catholic principles forward. Ultimately, as Catholics, we need to be pushing for the social reign of Christ. My point, though, is more so that our church doesn't do that right now. And unless our church actually gets back onto pushing forward her actual teaching, unfortunately, it's going to be kind of our opinion is going to be moot, if you will. It's not going to have a lot of force or carry weight. But if we look at the broader discussion, the broader picture of why Trump is putting a lot of these cabinet members in, he's doing so because he wants to change the system and or he wants to push an agenda which is going to be different. So one question that people have been asking is, what is Trump's foreign policy? I myself am kind of a Pat Buchanan isolationist. In Nick's perfect world, we would just kind of be out of everything. But that's not Trump's foreign policy. Trump's foreign policy, though, is not also neocon. He's not a neocon. He's not a George Bush. He is, if you will, kind of in the middle. He's a peace through strength conservative. What he says essentially is, hey, if you attack me, if you attack the United States, we're going to punch back so hard that, you'll be shattered into a million pieces. That's his foreign policy, which helps us understand picks like Marco Rubio. If we look at Marco Rubio is an individual, of course, who ran against Trump in 2016. However, he endorsed Trump for presidency later on. And then when you look at his voting record, he voted in lockstep with President Trump 100% of the way in that first term of Trump's presidency. But what Rubio is really known for is he's not a neocon. He's not a paleocon either. He's kind of a missing link conservative. He's part of that Tea Party bloc that came up in 2010. And he is wanting to push forward an anti-China agenda, which is going to be very, very helpful in economics because our big, if you will, foe, our nemesis that we're going to be having to work with when it comes to economics is China through the tariff policy. And so it makes sense why Trump is going to pick him because he has such a record of really going after the Chinese. If you look at it through that lens, as opposed to just looking at everything through the lens of Israel v. Palestine, which is a lot of people, they fall into that trap, then you will think Trump is just this Zionistic neocon. But I think it's better to look at him as more of what he is, which is like Trump is a 90s Democrat. He's like a center-right reformist candidate who just wants America to make money and to stop, having wasteful spending and getting screwed by other companies and other, countries around the world.
Let's talk mass deportations while we still have a few minutes left in the radio side. He wants mass deportations. They've promised they're going to start that process day one. There was a poll out last week by Rasmussen that said well over 60% of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, support mass deportations. But you know who's not going to support that is the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. There's going to be a lot of resistance, it seems, from U.S. bishops on that. How do we as Catholics feel about that?
Yeah, this is something that I've talked about myself at length with friends. It's the U.S. bishops, if they are unfortunately peddling an illegal immigration, mostly more likely than not for the money that is involved in it. This might be kind of a spicy opinion even for your audience, but I personally think that the federal government needs to prosecute, needs to actually go forward and say, hey, look, if you're going to try to get in the way of our agenda, which is, if you look, it's actually in complete line with Catholic principles. When one goes and actually reads the principles on a sovereign nation state by St. Thomas or something like that, you'll find that a country has the right to defend its borders and has the right also to deport individuals who are inside of that country who have broken the law. And so when it comes to these bishops, unfortunately, they need to really get away from the habits that they've gotten in. And I think let the federal government lead on this issue, at least because we have good people in charge now.
You expect the bishops to read St. Thomas? Come on, Nicholas. It's post-Vatican II.
No.
We're not reading Thomas anymore. That's so pre-Vatican II era. We don't do this. That's not in fashion anymore, don't you know? It does seem bizarre, doesn't it? It's like really weird. Like I lock my door for a reason. We lock our cars for a reason. But we're not allowed to lock our country for a reason. I would say lock the country down. Nobody in, nobody out until we have sorted this thing out. Because it's not just that we don't want people to come here. We want them to come here legally. And we want to have a system in which it's possible for people to come here. We don't want to make it impossible, but the system is broken every which way. It's hard to get here from certain countries. It's hard to stay here from certain countries. And it's super easy to come here illegally. And it's financially incentivized. And Catholic nonprofits are participating in the illegal nature of this all for money. And I think that's a key issue. I mean, shame on them for taking the big paycheck, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. It's all for money. And if you're an investigative journalist out there, the few of you that are left, that would be a good story to go and to look into of what some of these diocesan structures are doing. And then as far as their theology goes, you're right. I mean, I often say on the show that unfortunately, if you read the average thing that the bishops put out today, 100 years ago, they would have been brought before a Roman tribunal and judged for some type of suspect of heresy. And so we're in dire straits, to say the least.
Go read the Catechism of the Catholic Church and see how many quotations are from Vatican II documents and see how many from St. Thomas. I'm just saying, it's unbalanced, to say the least.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.